Hey guys, it's Thomas Guerra, welcome to my YouTube video. In this video I'm going to present to you the High Elf as we can see it on the Bull Roar server right now. I have left out spoilers from this video. The only thing I want to show you are all the cosmetic options as well as the racial traits and what it sort of implies concerning different class choices. I'm not going to show you the intro story of the High Elf because they do have a very unique intro story. It's a pretty good story, but I'll save that for a different video and I'll make it very clear that that video will contain story spoilers. This video will be spoiler free. It's just more of a presentation and a guide towards the High Elf. This is the male High Elf. Meanwhile, I'm going over the different cosmetic options. You can still see that the cosmetics need some finishing touches, as sometimes behind their ears you can see right through their heads, or sometimes you can see right through their ponytails, so these are some things that still need to be figured out. What's also not really finished is the fact that you can't really see any cosmetics on your hands or on your feet when you apply them in the cosmetic options of the character panel in-game. Meanwhile, here we see the female High Elf. You can see there are different origins of the High Elves. There's the Beleriand, Imladris, which is Rivendell, Nargothrond, Gondolin, and Osirian. So these are, I believe most of these are First Age locations, or even before the First Age, I'm not entirely sure. I'm meanwhile going through all of the different hairstyle options. I've picked a Gondolin elf. It seemed like a very interesting idea to go with an elf who's from Gondolin. Here you can see that there are indeed some glitches. This ponytail doesn't seem very finished either. I am going with this female High Elf. I've given her golden hair and I have chosen a Warden. The reason why I've chosen a Warden is going to be quite clear throughout the video. So I'm going to speed this up a little more. There's only so much you can say about the different cosmetic options, but I'm going to go through them all. Meanwhile, after this, I have gone through the story for the High Elf, the opening story. It's really a good and interesting story in my opinion, but I'll leave that for another video, as I've said, because this is going to be spoiler free. After this, or after that, I have leveled my Warden to level 115, which is the new endgame level for Mordor, and in the Isengard Tavern, which is a Bull Roar specific thing, I have gotten all of the best gear I could find to make a Warden tank. I've gotten myself some legendary items, trait points, virtues, the whole thing to make a completely decked out Warden tank to the best of my abilities. So this is that exact same High Elf Warden that I have just made. She has now been given a cosmetic look and has been upgraded with all of the best gear in the Isengard Tavern. If you have any questions about the statistics that you see on my character, then I highly recommend you to watch my previous video on the Mordor expansion. Meanwhile, these are the racial traits. This is plus 10% out of combat run speed, plus something will, plus 2.5% sword damage. Then we also see plus some virtues. And then we see a plus 5% light type damage. Interesting option right there. Here we see a travel to Karas Galadon. This is apparently the home of the High Elves right now. Then Wrath of the blah blah blah, which gives you plus 5% damage for the entire fellowship. Then a revive skill. That's also something very unique. And finally, we also see the typical stun or daze skill for 3 seconds that everyone has. So now I'm going to rearrange my virtues a little bit because I'm overcapped on my physical mitigation. Anyway, what is interesting about this is that at first sight when I saw those racial traits, it seemed to make sense to me to make a Warden. These seem to benefit specifically classes that, for instance, do not have an out-of-combat revive just yet. But the Warden, of course, as you know, they have this forced march that makes them run at plus 38% run speed. You can throw an extra tome of run speed on top of that, and they run really fast, as you can see here. Now, this is even 10% faster thanks to that High Elf trait. Wardens in the Ettenmoors, for instance, are already used to running fast out of combat on their own, and this even adds more to that, which gives them a specific tactical advantage in the Ettenmoors when they are being focused by warg packs, for instance, because they can outrun them more easily just on foot. Now I want to show you guys something really cool. Try and jump off quite a height and look what happens. a barrel roll. That's something we haven't seen before. I don't think this is on any other race right now, but it may be a completely new change for Mordor, but it seems like maybe only the High Elf gets this type of barrel roll, so that's a pretty cool little feature. Anyway, let's zoom in further on the other racial traits, specifically plus 5% light damage. Now what's interesting about that is there's a number of classes that could benefit from extra light damage. Even the hunter could benefit from it, but it's specifically interesting, I thought specifically interesting for the warden tank. Usually racial traits are not that important and are never really a deciding factor on which kind of class you probably should use. But it might actually have a tangible impact for warden tanking. And the reason is, if you're a tank, you will start to maximize all kinds of statistics that increase your defenses, you know, and you'll usually have a little less mastery. Now this warden is really decked out with gear that I don't think will even be available in the first builds of the Mordor expansion. I think it's only later on that you even can make your warden this powerful. So she has even more physical mastery than she should normally have. A more realistic number for a warden tank at the end game in the beginning of the Mordor expansion would be, I don't know, probably 70,000, 80,000 at best physical mastery. So any bonus on top of that that increases your damage output will have a much bigger impact if your physical mastery is lower than if your physical mastery would be higher. So a warden tank with low physical mastery has a lot more impact, a lot more increase on their damage by that 5% light damage than a warden that has glass cannon kind of mastery that will put them on plus 350% outgoing damage. That's just the way it works in this game. Now that is interesting for a warden tank in particular, because the way a warden tank works, the way they keep aggro is not necessarily with force taunts the way it is with captains and guardians. They do have a force taunt, but it's not something to rely upon. The way they keep aggro is with their AoE, outgoing damage, that has a threat multiplier to it. So warden tanks do need to use their fist gambits that are light damage to have that AoE damage output so the threat stays on them. And that is when I think, definitely with the low mastery that warden tanks would have, this is why I think that plus 5% light damage racial trait will actually probably have a tangible impact for experienced warden tanks. So it might be that actually for once, choosing your race consciously when making a class, in this case a warden, may actually result in tangibly better combat experience. So at this point I've turned on combat analysis, but of course the numbers, the DPS numbers that you will see here don't really have any kind of meaning to it because I haven't upgraded all of my legacies at all. I haven't applied a single scroll of empowerment or even a single starlit crystal, and that of course has a much bigger impact on your DPS than a racial trait of 5% light damage. Now nonetheless, it was just a little practice to see how I would be keeping aggro as a warden tank. Now otherwise, as I said in my previous video, the class pool of the High Elf is the exact same of the normal elf, but with a captain on top of it. So this was Thomas Guerra, thank you for watching and see you in my next video.